Okay, welcome to the panel, everybody. Thank you for making the time for us. So, Carsten, let me start with you. Thank you very much for those slides. Really enjoyed that. What I'm taking away from what you've said is there are negatives, there are positives, but I'm feeling like you're telling us there is a net positive.
Yes. I think primarily I'm saying it doesn't matter. We just have to suck it up. But there is a potential for creating, making it a net positive. And I think it takes that positive momentum going into completely uncharted territory to say we can make it a net positive for that to become true.
Okay, got it. So Robin, welcome to the panel. Thank you for your time. So you help organizations really think about and get ready for the transformation that may be needed here. So listening to what we heard from Carsten and about the framing of this coupling, if you like, of AI and networks, tell us, how do you look at this opportunity or this challenge?
So my background is basically in human factors and cybersecurity, which is dealing with human performance. Human factors in cyber is not ergonomics, it's not behavior management, it is really looking at how the human performs and how in cyber we can try to decrease that rate of 90% of breaches going through the human. So how do you fit AI into that? I've been working very, very hard for about 18 months now on AI strategy, governance, and what that means to our people. So not as much as the technology side, but with what you were talking about, Carsten, about deep fakes and the phishing. How do we let our people, how do we train them how to understand or look for some of these deep fakes? We have talked in a couple of other panels, they've been mentioning the incident that happened in Japan where the entire board was deep faked, $25.5 million was moved to an account. And when I talk to people about that, they say, you know, how do we not fall for something like that? And I think we're back to the old time of spy technology, MI6 in the old days. I live in London, where before computers you had to pass paper, right? So I think to some degree we have to have some secondary elements beyond technology where we have some backup plans.
So let me just that's really helpful. Let me just make sure I've understood that. So when we take an example like the deep fakes in the board meeting in that Japanese organization, so you're helping organizations understand from a people perspective how to perhaps address that better. Is that right? Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, that's one factor.
Yeah.
But yes, to address, I don't like the term human risk. I just don't like it. But for lack of a better term, we have our vulnerability and our business risk profile and what we want to accept, mitigate, whatever, and then we have the human risk. And how do you mitigate that or avoid it? And it's really by getting to know your people.
Okay, let's try and keep opening up this conversation a little bit more. So, Tor, I'm going to come to you in a couple of minutes just to sort of ask you about how this is being done, because you're in the mobile network operator industry. But Taylor, maybe I'll start with you first. So you join us from a major mobile equipment manufacturer, but you've got your own specialism skills there. So tell us a bit about how you come into this with your amazing background, but also how do you think we should be thinking about approaching this?
Yeah, so I'm a security architect, right? And so if you are developing a tool yourself, an AI tool, please get me involved in the beginning, not after you've already made the product, right? So we want to design with security in mind. Secure by default, secure by design. Because what you don't want is your model being stolen and used for some of this malicious activity.
I'm just going to interrupt you on that. So how do we do that? Because it's not like we're starting. We're already running services, businesses, applications. We're serving hundreds of millions of customers. We're mid-journey.
Yes.
So how does that work then?
So I know at least at my company, we have been implementing ML security operations this whole time, right? It didn't take, ChatGPT to wake us up, right? And so as we start integrating new tools, we'll still use that same type of ML SecOps, right? And so it's going to be a CI/CD plus now a CT, so continuous improvement, continuous development, and continuous training, right?
Okay.
So CI/CD, we've been doing that. Now we're just adding a little bit more to the mix.
Okay, so we'll come back to that in a moment. So were you giving me the look that did you want to make a comment? Cut. You're not giving me the look. Okay, fine. All right. So Tor, welcome to the panel. You're joining us from a mobile network operator that's got operations across Europe and Asia, and so you've got a lot of breadth there. Tell us, how are you going about this from the perspective of a mobile operator?
Excellent question. So how do you secure a global enterprise? It's a quite complex operation, but we can narrow it a bit down. Protecting anything, we need to be able to understand risk, and we need to break it down. We need to hire experts like you. We need to apply security controls. Access control is one of 1,000 controls that we apply to enterprise. And these controls are very much based upon best practices, right? So what we do is that we apply base security all over our organization. We use typically ISO standards like 27001, 2, and we have a more detailed structure where we have thousands of requirements that is on an architectural level. So all these controls in the risk equation is to handle the vulnerability dimension. And for us, vulnerability is lack of controls. So that is important. But there's two other dimensions here to be able to protect an enterprise.
And Taylor mentioned secure by design.
Yes.
What's like from a practical perspective of running this business? Where are you at with this concept of security by design?
Yeah, so that's the entire role of applying a structured approach to protecting your asset, right?
Yeah.
So, but the interesting thing here is that with AI, the threat landscape will be changing, right? We really don't know the future yet. So that is something that I think as an industry, we need to follow more detail. That's really a passion of me.
I mean, look, maybe we're not going to answer all the questions today or solve it, but I'm feeling as though maybe we try over the next few minutes to sort of frame it up a little bit. Let me just be a bit personal. I mean, one of the things I'm feeling personally from this conference over the last 3 or 4 days is a sense of feeling a little bit overwhelmed, in the sense that it seems to be happening fast. And I wonder whether there is a question about how do I chunk this up into different sorts of activities? And Carsten, I'm going to look at you as the interim CISO for our panel. So can you help us think about how would you want to be chunking this up into a set of topics or issues that as executives or organizations that run our businesses that we can think about this from?
Yeah. Maybe to latch on what Tor said, AI is changing the threat landscape, and probably in 5 years it'll be very difficult to look back and remember what we did today in security. However, all that change is happening gradual, right? And every 5-year segment has led to a complete revolution of what threats we're facing. So nothing is ever the same in security a few years after. And now it happens to be AI that's driving that change. But as an industry, I think we've shown that while we can't predict the future, we are very good at tactically responding to it, right? And as long as AI is mostly used to amplify attacks that we already know, our speed of change just needs to match that, right?
Social
engine.
Yeah, come on, yeah.
Sneak in a question. This is super interesting when it comes to the threat picture, right? My question to you is, should we start discussing a synthetic threat agent, right? With unsupervised learning algorithms and generative AI. Is that something we should start work systematically on?
I think we have those tools, and Taylor and I were speaking about red teaming before. Red teaming is, if you don't know, the attempt to think like the criminal and to break your own organization. And if you have a good red team, usually they are several months ahead of the criminal. So if your red team isn't already using AI, then it's not doing its job. Will it, in 5 years, still worry about AI, or will there be another topic that the exact same process, the adversarial thinking, the continuously challenging yourself with outside means with an inside team, right? Will that still be relevant? Absolutely, right? So we do have these self-healing mechanisms already built into our organizations.
But if you jump out of the technology box just for a second.
Yep.
Okay, AI is different than anything we've seen before. It is completely cross-functional. So it's not held within the CISO team. It's not held within IT. It's not held within HR. It touches everybody. So I think of it like in basically 4 boxes. You've got products that you want to deliver, products that you want to create that are AI-based, and the threats, vulnerabilities there. Then you've got your employees that you have to train, and your developers and everybody else. Put in those guardrails, policies that you have to design. Then you've got your governance. Basically, how are we going to responsibly and ethically have AI within our business? And then you've got your third-party suppliers. And you had asked me earlier to tell a story. So with third-party suppliers, and I spend a lot of time on that, because it's not just the suppliers that we're bringing on. And I will challenge you to go back to your TPRM departments and see how many questions they actually do have to the new suppliers on AI, because they probably don't have any yet. I mean, it's coming so fast, right? So with third parties, it's not just the people that we're about to bring on and the technologies with AI, and looking at all of where do they store their data, how do they train their data, and all that good stuff. Oh, and then we've got the regulators. We won't even talk about that yet. But with your current suppliers, and I'll just be real brief, Adobe, a month or so ago, turned on a security where you had to go in and actually opt out of them using anything that you put in that document into a large language learning model. So I ran into it on Hacker News. It wasn't really publicized anywhere else. So you had to physically go in and opt out of that. And if you don't know to do that, then confidential data may or may not be out there in the open source, as you said. And then, how do you get it back?
Okay. Anybody else want to come in?
Yeah, no, I'd love to speak on this third-party risk as well, because the AI market is changing drastically, and we're not just buying tools now. We can also buy the model. We can buy the data, right? And so you need to be able to do a risk assessment on all of these items. And you also kind of need to make the assumption that this data I purchased is already poisoned. All right, what can I do? How can I fix this? And same thing, my models that I've bought, it's already broken. What can I do? And we don't really have a full set of questions to ask any of these sellers, right? We don't have a certification for them or anything. And so those are things that we're still being worked on. I think Microsoft has a good set of AI risk management, but we're still working on, what's the baseline for these third-party sellers to meet?
Okay, I don't know how the audience is feeling right now, whether you're feeling more threatened or more secure with this discussion, but we've got six points, and Tor, I'm gonna come to you on this. So, how does this sound? So we've got understand the threat landscape, think about your products and services, design, engage with your employees, look at your governance, deal with your third-party suppliers and supply chain, and understand the regulatory environment.
Yeah, so it's really interesting, and at the pace now things are changing. It's much faster as well. So when working with managing risk in organization, protecting towards AI, I believe we really need to cooperate better as well, right? We are spending lots of resources at each sector at each company, working on simulating threats, creating, attack scenarios. This is something that I think we should have a much more better structure cross-company, because what we actually do is hire people like you, and we work systematically on trying to play out incidents, fraudulent cases, that type of thing, and break them apart.
Let me just build on that a bit. One of the points you made there. So the technology capability is global. The digital technology reach for hackers and for threat agents is global. Yet organizations are oftentimes local. In your case, you're a group. In your case, you're a global business, but oftentimes local. How do we, Tor, I'm just going to come back to you on this one, and then Taylor, maybe bring you back in as well. So how do we deal with the fact that the threat is this globally capable? I mean, we got the example of the Japanese phishing email, right? That could have come from anywhere, right? How do we deal with this? The fact that we're local organizations, but we need to deal with something that's quite global.
No different than in the past, right? Like the fact that now both sides have an additional tool in their toolbox doesn't change the setup. I mean, probably that problem goes back hundreds of years, where criminal organizations were able to operate between different police jurisdictions, right? We still have that, but we have gotten a lot better, thanks to digital technologies, in exchanging information. And so we have these early warning systems, specifically around the GSMA. It's the ISAC, the information sharing something, where if one telco sees a hacker coming in, everyone else will learn about it. And they might have been successful the first time, but you have this huge investment as a criminal, and you deploy your cyber capability once, and all of a sudden everyone knows about it and defends themselves. So I think we're turning, and at the very least, rebalancing the playing field right now through collaboration, right? Independent of AI. AI is now one of those topics that uses the existing sharing channels, and hopefully more so in the future.
Yeah, and I fully support and agree. This is not something new. But I think we should really put more emphasis on understanding our threat actors. Because, and you touched on something extremely interesting also, don't kill innovation, right? And it's very easy to, drown on thousands of security requirements. But what we should do, regardless of AR or not, is understand what we are protecting us towards. And that is important. So we need to find that balance. And that's something I think will be, tough times ahead.
I think a point could be made that if we had a future, a possible route to the future where we introduce AI with no casualties, that is far inferior to a future where we allow ourselves to experiment and accept some casualties on a faster, accelerated path towards whatever AI will give us.
Okay. Exactly, and when incidents happen, we need to learn from that and get better all the time, so it's a cyclic thing.
I think from a global standpoint, because my company, we work globally as well, I think what's more frustrating for me anyway is just the regulatory landscape, because we have had the EU AI Act that has been passed recently, and it is starting to come into play with DORA and everything else. But I know the executive order that the United States signed was in October. The Fed has a position, the SEC has a position, but just keeping up with all of that per.
And Robin, is that concern with regulation, is that really like that trade-off between regulation and innovation? Is that the concern, or
I think it just depends on. I mean, like the EU AI Act, what's good about that is it's what do they call it? Extraterritorial. So it's anybody that deals with anything in the EU. So it's kind of given a good standard on what is high risk and prohibited. So if I am a global company, probably I wouldn't want to create anything that was prohibited in the EU. I think it gives us a good starting point, you know, and it's related to OECD and NIST, so they're all sort of thinking along the same lines, which is nice. I don't know if I answered your question there, though.
Okay, good. Let's talk a bit about industries and different industries. I mean, obviously the critical infrastructure often goes towards industries that impact our daily well-being, inclusivity and safety in society, so networks which we really depend on for emergency services, defense, etc. When we think about those types of critical services and supporting infrastructure, do we need to think about this differently, or is it the same?
If I can comment, you know, it's interesting discussion with AI also on, you know, the opposite of protecting our data, because, you know, a good AI system needs good data, right? So that's also a discussion we really haven't had yet, right? We should actually contribute with data to make something better. You know, last year I bought a self-driving Chinese car, right? I very much, and my hobby project is actually to hack that car. So we can talk about that later. But it's really interesting to see, you know, they use the data from this car to make that car better, yet they take my data and move it to countries I really don't like my data to be. So that, you know, balance is super important, right? And that touches upon your innovation discussion, right? Because we need to allow technology to become better. So we need to feed the machines data, yet we need to protect it, right? So that's the dilemma. I think that we really haven't cracked that yet. And we have, you know, the privacy regulations, you know, they are strict, and we should contain data within the EU, right? And that doesn't play well with the global structures. And also you have the hyperscalers, you know, working on, you know, sovereign focus to move the data into certain countries. That is good, but that's also a challenge. So that dynamics is really not something that we have solved the equation upon, in my head at least.
Yeah. Well, I think I disagree a little bit, right? These governance for different countries exist for a reason, right? They want to protect their own people's data. And so I don't see a big global like telco AI tool, right? I think there's going to be a lot of small models that are very centralized and localized that we can contain easier and that are going to be built in through different layers of the network, right? And as AI continues to develop, yeah, maybe that'll change. Maybe we will have larger models that, you know, train some of the smaller models from within. Especially in the lower layers, you need almost pure autonomy, right? Because it's doing real-time analysis. You don't have time for human in the loop there, right? And so we need to make sure those are super, super secure, right? And I just see that happening, at least today, right, and something that's just far more centralized.
Yeah, no, very good comment, and we need to make it super secure. But if we then regulate too much again, we hinder innovation. So it's really an interesting trade-off that we need to. I think we need to have that discussion. So there's a balance, and
I think
we are securing as much as we can, just to state that. But I think that's an important future discussion when it comes to AI, that dynamics.
I think that was a big conflict, right?
Yeah,
the last triage for the EU AI Act to be passed, because they were afraid that having this big governing body was going to stop innovation in the smaller countries and smaller companies.
So also it's, you know, it's a risk understanding, you know, how much what will, you know, the impact and the consequence to the society needs to be discussed. But what's not discussed there is how much, you know, uncertainty do we accept? How much 100% security do we have? Everything can be hacked, right? That's something that we know. That's why we hire people like you. So we need to be able to determine what kind of uncertainty do we accept when it comes to our ecosystem. And that's not something that is, you know, we don't have that number yet. So that's super interesting.
Yeah, it's super relevant to remember the baseline, right? That we compare. That it's always easy to find flaws in new technologies on paper, saying, oh, this is going to make us all hackable. Yes, we're already all hackable, so it's going to make no difference whatsoever, unless we're really being reckless. But even at that point, our regulators, we were talking about regulators, are regulators there to make companies not be risk takers anymore, prevent companies from being reckless? No, I think that's what shareholders and markets are there for. And if companies want to be reckless, let them be reckless, with one exception when it comes to externalities, and that is basically gambling with the data of individuals that ultimately can lead to profound and long-lasting consequences for those individuals when they get scammed and their identities repurposed, right? And I think the individual trade-off between how much innovation do I want versus how much do I want companies to gamble with my data, that differs by country, right? In Europe, we take a more conservative role, maybe based on, we're already happy with our lives, so nothing should change here. Whereas in some other countries, I was in India, we connected 400 million people to the internet for the first time. They primarily wanted connectivity. Would they have preferred secure connectivity over insecure? Sure, but not given a choice, they'll take any connectivity because that's the primary objective, right? So I think that creates room for regional or local regulation, kind of considering whatever preferences the peoples have. But as long as it's not dealing with individuals' data, let companies gamble, let the markets figure it out.
Very good.
What I do need to demand of these companies is some transparency, so I know the level of gambling they're doing, right? And I don't think, and even a lot of these LLMs right now, they can't even explain how they're getting the answers or how some of it works, right? We need transparency before we start buying these things, instead of just buying them and plugging them in somewhere, and that's just been really difficult. So transparency and explainability is needed.
So let me try and summarize 3 things that I think I've heard, and tell me if I'm wrong. So one is, we need to have clarity about the risk certainty levels that we're accepting, and the uncertainty levels that we're accepting. We need to think about autonomy, where there is a lower desire to accept risk, and we therefore have greater controls and more autonomy on those, if I understand correctly. And we need to enable or allow as much freedom as possible. But what I've heard is the freedom shouldn't be unbounded. There should be some level of transparency around that freedom. Does that mean that we need some sorts of, is that where we talk about regulation or about standards? Yeah, Tor.
Yeah, so really interesting discussion. Yeah, if you go back to my Chinese car and your point on let the market regulate itself, right? I have a Chinese car, it's sending all my data to China. It's self-driving, it can kill me, right? It can drive out and take my life. Is that a risk I am willing to accept? Should I move that risk acceptance to a company in China?
Yeah.
Should I do that?
And at least you should be informed about those risks.
Yeah, and those mechanisms are not there yet. And this is AI, right?
And what, Carsten, I think you said is, this is not new. I think we had I think it was the Model T. This is something we've been dealing with for decades or centuries, which is these implicit decisions about what we're prepared to do or not do. Every time you walk down the street, you're implicitly deciding it's safe enough to do so, right? So it's not as though AI is new, but the paradigms, the risks, the issues are perhaps not new. It's just in a new form. Would that be reasonable?
Yes, new form, and it's generative, and that's something that we haven't solved.
Right? So I want to throw a bit of a spanner in the works, if I may. So we started with the first point being understand the threat landscape, right? Now, from what I've heard from the panel discussion, it sounds a little bit like the landscape is being characterized as almost what I'd call a cat and mouse game. So there's the dark side, and we need to try and stay ahead. We need to try and stay ahead. We need to try and stay ahead, which to me sounds a little bit like cat and mouse.
Yeah.
But is that really the threat landscape? Is there not the possibility of a different sort of threat that is not part of the incremental cat and mouse, but is a seismic or a different type of threat that is not forecasted? Is that a possibility, or am I just reading too much science fiction?
The possibility always exists, and people talk about the singularity and those things, right?
Yes.
But that possibility has always existed in technology, right? That there's breakthroughs. And I think the best hedge against that risk is to try to make the breakthrough on the defense rather than the attack side, right? I think the chances are higher there, but we are diminishing the chances if we spend all day worrying about what's gonna happen because other people are creative.
Got it. Okay, that's good. That's good. Okay, where else do we want to go? We've got about 7 or 8 minutes left. With any other big points you want to start bringing in?
Can I just comment on understanding the threat landscape? And there's two. Working systematically on understanding the threat landscape is something that we need to strengthen, and we need to group. We need to work systematically on understanding our random hackers and separate them from state-sponsored groups. Right? We need to understand their motivation. We need to work systematically on that. We need to understand their capabilities, their capacity. How large are they? What kind of tools are they using? So we really need to break this more systematic down in the future, and that's extremely important. And yes, there are mechanisms today, and we are following the threat landscape. But I really think the industry should do even more mandatory sharing of threat intelligence between companies. Okay. That's something that needs to be strengthened.
Yeah, if I could offer a few resources. I believe that someone who's attacking AI is going to go for integrity, availability, privacy, and now with generative AI, we also have this abuse factor, right? And if you want to see a really good way to threat model, I recommend MITRE's Atlas, which is basically MITRE ATT&CK, but for AI, right? And so they've started mapping out all of these new threats. NIST just put out an AI document. It's a taxonomy on adversarial machine learning, right? And so at least having common rhetoric, right? What are we all talking about? That's step one, and they're already calling it adversarial machine learning, not attacks on AI. So we all have to come to a consensus on what we're talking about. Yeah. But things are being published like every other day, it feels like. I'm consistently reading a new document. So we are working on putting more stuff out there. It's just, this is so new and it's changing so much. And yeah, we'll see if any 0 days arise in the process. Yeah, the MITRE work framework is excellent, right? That's a good structure. And actually, if you work systematically with the MITRE framework, you can actually see that the threat picture is fairly static, right? So it's that's to your point as well. This is actually not something new.
That's good. So, Robin, I just wanted to come back to you for a moment, Robin. So, people in the organization, can we just bring it back there for a minute? Yeah, can you tell us a bit more about, given what we've discussed, how do we, or how do you feel we work with the organizations, with our teams, with our people to move forward with this journey?
I've got a really good friend. Her name is Jenny Ratcliffe, and she's a people hacker. And she says, I don't need the keys to your building. I just need one person. So if you think about that and everything with AI, I think it's really critical that, number one, you've got to define what AI means for your company, get some sort of policy in there, and do it yesterday. And also start teaching your people what they're going to use Copilot. They're going to use ChatGPT. They're going to, because quite frankly, it's fun and it makes it easier. But what I want my employees to know is that, look, I'm even looking at Gen AI tools that some departments want us to use, and I can go down a rabbit hole and find the information on where that data is actually stored, and then somewhere in the small print it'll be like, oh, and by the way, what data we give you, we we have no commitment that it's going to be accurate. So it's like, well, then what was the point? Because that we're supposed to be having efficiency, and instead we're getting nebulous information that we've got to go back and have human eyes on anyway.
Thank you. Carsten, you've been giving me that look.
Very good resources pointed to by all of you. Maybe to give the shortest synopsis, and maybe just 2 takeaway points for somebody who doesn't want to go through the entire Atlas standard. Great catalog, but heavy too, right? Really 2 things to take away. First, if you put data into an AI model, it's public. It might not be obvious how it's public, but we're learning more and more ways of extracting data. Consider it public. Don't put something private in an AI model. Second, increase the level of automation at least by another 50% from where you are now in security defense, because the other side does it too, right? If you stay still, then they're going to overwhelm you, right? Between those 2 things, you basically cover everything that these models, these quickly evolving models cover, right? So it's not a lost battle yet, but if you sleep, nobody else is on the other side right now, and you're going to lose, right? So it really is about maintaining that relative proportion on level of automation and not doing something stupid by thinking my LLM can keep secrets.
So we've got about a couple of minutes left, and I'd love to finish by just all of us saying a little bit about what this means to me over the rest of this year. What am I going to be doing to understand and act in this space with a bit more? I'll maybe start, so I'll give you a few seconds to think about your answers, right? So I'm really fascinated by this coupling of AI with networks. So over the next few months, I'm going to be doing more to try and understand what that coupling really means in terms of functionality, capability, and then for me, like the investment requirement and how much money is needed to be spent in that space. That's what I'm going to be doing over the next few months, right? So Taylor, maybe start with you.
Yeah, well, I'm going to be busy, that's for certain. This year is full of AI for me. So agree, let's automate some things, please, and get some stuff off my plate. But I will, a lot of educating executives, educating leaders, educating regulators, right? And trying to explain this threat landscape. So I'll be doing a lot of that. I'll be working on several publications to just trying to create something that is just a bit more digestible, something that people can read, right? And start to understand all these things so they aren't making dumb mistakes and putting, PII in a model.
Thank you. Robin.
I'm just a big believer that knowledge is power, and my goal is to, as with you, to educate all the levels of our organization, and then the third-party risk management, and looking at those solutions.
Thank you. Tor.
AI changes everything. This will be, hell of a ride to follow, to be honest. And but still, your defenses still applies. Yeah. But this will really be interesting.
Thank you.
Carsten. Yeah, I mean, extrapolating from the discussions we have with our clients now, I expect to continue nudging people away from trying to reinvent everything and, it's going to be an AI in the future, to saying, which step of your process can be automated? Focus on that. Start small, start boring, but get it done within a few weeks. Next step, next step, next step. Do stuff better, not different.
Thank you. Thank you for being an amazing panel. Really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you very much. Round of applause for our panel.